There's been a lot of chatter recently about the live-action castings for Disney's live-action version of Lilo and Stitch. The two characters, Nanny and David, in the original animation, both drawn to be native Hawaiian, the live-action castings definitely appearing to be more white Hawaiian. And there is outrage coming in from multiple different angles. One that has certainly stood out is that of colorism with this particular casting. The dictionary definition of colorism being prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Now, in the case of these two castings, the discrimination isn't necessarily coming from the same racial or ethnic group. However, the fact that two actors who at a base level are certainly white passing have been cast does usher us down the road of colorism. And then there are people on the other side who are equating this casting to that of Halle Bailey as Ariel, because why would the internet miss an opportunity to talk about Halle Bailey as Ariel? But I think there's a real issue there, because at the very foundation of comparing these Lilo and Stitch castings to the casting of Halle Bailey, we're essentially making race swapping and whitewashing equitable, and they're not equitable. In fact, it's kind of insidious to assume that they are. And look, the nuance that we are missing out there that needs to be considered is the history of whitewashing and race swapping, because the reasons that both are a thing in the first place are completely different. And we all know the history of whitewashing. It is centered around a mission, and this is something that Hollywood has done very well. And actually, it's really not limited to Hollywood. In fact, Hollywood is just a little cog within the grand scheme of whitewashing. And what whitewashing has done throughout all of Hollywood's reign of cinema is to center white people as the norm, to center them in the stories of minoritized race people. It allows Hollywood to control the characters, control the stereotypes and how they are portrayed and received. And you only need to look back at the history of some glaring examples of whitewashing. You have Jonathan Pryce on Broadway in Miss Saigon playing the engineer, a half French, half Vietnamese character in which he bronzed up and had to put prosthetics on for his eye makeup. It was a whole thing. I mean, there were protests in the streets because of it, but Jonathan Pryce went on to win Best Actor Tony Award, so that's good. And then you've got Laurence Olivier, who blackfaced in order to play Othello, and he got a Best Oscar nomination for that one. And they're just two prime examples of whitewashing that have then included yellow and blackfacing, where the actors have not only collected the characters of minoritized race people, but they've collected great admiration for it as well. Of course, the most offensive of the whitewashing characters that has ever been portrayed on screen was Mickey Rooney as Mr. Yuniyoshi in Breakfast at Tiffany's. I'm not going to go into the full details of that one. There are clips on YouTube if you want to watch, but my gosh, is it hella offensive. Like, it's actually kind of nuts. And yeah, sure, something like that really wouldn't happen today, one would hope, but here we are making this video, and whenever these castings come up, the history is going to be brought up as examples as to why these kind of things are not done anymore. And another reason why we're always going to question these decisions is that whitewashing leads to holding up this beauty standard that happens in Western society, that everything is based off of white European features, that these are what we must aspire to look like. I mean, if you look back at the original Lilo and Stitch animation and how both Nanny and David are drawn, they are drawn to look a very particular way, and that is native Hawaiian. Their features do not fit white European standards. And you'll have to ask, why would you do that? And for me, the only answer I can seem to come across is to make these characters more palatable to the audience that Disney are trying to chase. But then I have to kind of bring into question, but Disney have been doing well, leaps and bounds in fact, with their representation. When you look at projects such as Encanto, Moana, we've got the upcoming Wish as well. Then you look at Pixar with Coco turning red, they've got Elemental coming up. It all just seems kind of strange to me. But look, if I take those examples of Encanto and Moana, if I take Coco and Turning Red, in which they haven't just brought the stories of minoritized race people forward, they've inherently brought in their culture as well. Look how rich the stories of Encanto and Moana are, delving into the specific cultures they portray. Coco as well would not be as beautiful a film if it doesn't actually not just place a minoritized race person in the center of the story, but places their culture in there too. All right, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, so let's bring it back to talking about the history of race swapping in comparison to whitewashing. So race swapping really is just kind of a very new phenomenon in Hollywood, right? It was introduced as a way of bringing more diversity on the screen in the absence of original minoritized race characters. But it is a double-edged sword, on that we can all agree, but it has brought more diversity to the screen even though it does have its own omission as well. And race swapping thus far has only ever occurred when you're taking a character from a comic book, a novel, a video game, a TV show, a film, and they were originally white in that, and now they are of a minoritized race in the new adaptation. And its omission comes when a minoritized race actor is cast in the new role and they are no longer available to play an original minoritized race character that may be adapted into a new story. So a lot of people don't like race swapping because they believe it is erasing the chance of having an original minoritized race story. And I'm specifically looking to the MCU here because there are plenty of black superheroes in the Marvel comics, but thus far in the MCU we've only had 2 black-led projects, even though there is an abundance of black superheroes within the MCU. Therefore it is easy to see why people would equate race swapping to whitewashing, because to the naked eye they are very similar. Although you only really have to consider their histories to see why they are not equitable. I mean, whitewashing was brought in centered with omission and controlling stereotypes, whereas race swapping was brought in order to increase diversity and representation on screen. But I'm actually going to take this one level deeper, and I really want to see if you can stick with me on this one. I think a lot of people are going to drop off, but I'm doing this. Is race swapping actually even a thing? Honestly, hear me out, because lately I've been thinking a lot about this and my mind was sort of made up when a friend sent me a video on TikTok of a guy complaining about the casting of Tinkerbell in the new Peter Pan and Wendy film. For those of you who don't know, the actress playing Tinkerbell is a black actress named Yara Shahidi, and in this video that was sent to me, the guy was saying that Tinkerbell has been white for over 100 years and she should continue to be white. There is no reason to change her. There's something key in which he says in there. He says Tinkerbell has been white for over 100 years. And I want to examine that because 100 years ago, specifically in the US, segregation was still a thing. And Peter Pan, the stories, the characters were originally published in 1906 by J.M. Barrie, a Scottish novelist. Now, I'm in no way saying that J.M. Barrie wrote Peter Pan to hold up US segregation. That is not a fact at all. All I'm saying is that if we're going to make a sweeping statement such as Tinkerbell has been white for 100 years and therefore should always be, why are we not examining and questioning why that has been? You know, the original Peter Pan Disney animated film came out in 1953. US segregation only ended in 1950. So of course Tinkerbell was not going to be drawn to appear black in that film. She was always probably going to be drawn to be white because she is a goodie. So that kind of makes sense. And especially in that film, you only need to think about how the Native American people are portrayed in that film. In fact, go onto Disney Plus right now, turn on Peter Pan. There is a warning that comes up before the film starts playing to tell you that the way people are depicted in this film is outdated. And so therefore we can't really use the phrases of it happened this way 100 years ago to justify why it's happening now. That's outdated. That's done with. And so you have to ask yourself this question. If these characters were made from scratch today and they did not need to be white, would they be? If your answer is any way along the lines of, actually, no, yeah, you're right, Elliot, they kind of don't need to be, then you understand why I don't believe race swapping is actually a thing, especially when you are adapting something. You're making your version of it. If you don't like the version that's being made, make your own version where it doesn't have this race swapping, gender swapping, sexuality, whatever you think is a swap. Okay, because the reason these people have not been there in the first place is because of upholding how things were done during that time period. We're speaking 100 years ago, 80, 70 years ago for the original film. And so really, I think instead of like putting all our energy into arguing about the casting of Halle Bailey as the Little Mermaid, we should be putting our energy into putting the pressure on whitewashing when it occurs, because it is a much more offensive, grotesque thing to happen than race swapping, for all the reasons that I've explained in this video. Anyway, if you want to hear me talk more about whitewashing in history as it pertains to film and TV, click that video right there. If you have hated me talking about race swapping and you want more reason to get annoyed, click that video right there. And if you loved what I've done today, make sure you hit this video with a like, subscribe, turning on that bell notification, and I'll see you in a future video. Hakuna MaChatter.